The stagecoach lurched to a violent stop outside the Mercantile in Snowflake, Arizona territory, throwing Louisa Harper forward into the worn leather seat, her heart hammering as she realized just how far from Boston she truly was now. How utterly alone in this harsh frontier world of 1882. She gathered her dark green traveling dress and stepped down onto the dusty Main Street, squinting against the brilliant November sun that seemed to mock the biting wind cutting through her wool coat. The driver tossed her trunk down with little ceremony, tipped his hat, and drove off before she could even ask where she might find lodging. Around her, the small town looked nothing like the letters her cousin had sent, describing a thriving community. What she saw instead were weathered buildings, tumbleweeds rolling past empty storefronts, and precious few people on the streets. "You must be Miss Harper." The voice came from behind her, belonging to a thin woman in a faded calico dress. "I'm Martha Yates. Your cousin Sarah asked me to meet you." "Where is Sarah?" Louisa asked, searching the woman's tired face for answers. Martha's expression softened with sympathy. "I'm sorry to tell you this, especially after such a long journey. Sarah passed 3 weeks ago. Fever took her quickly." The words hit Louisa like a physical blow. She gripped her reticule tighter, fighting the wave of grief and panic threatening to overwhelm her. Sarah had been her only living relative, the reason she'd sold everything in Boston and traveled across the country. Now, what was she supposed to do? "She spoke of you often in those last days," Martha continued gently. "Said you were coming to make a fresh start. I promised her I'd help you get settled." Louisa nodded, unable to trust her voice. She had $20 in her purse, the clothes in her trunk, and now no family waiting for her. The wind picked up again, cutting through her coat like it wasn't even there, and she shivered violently. "Come on then," Martha said, picking up one end of the trunk. "You can stay with me tonight. Tomorrow we'll figure out what's to be done." Martha's house was small but warm, heated by a pot-bellied stove that Louisa gravitated toward immediately. Over weak tea and cornbread, Martha explained the situation in Snowflake. The town had fallen on hard times. Several businesses had closed. Many families had moved on to more prosperous areas. The few who remained were struggling ranchers and farmers trying to make it through another harsh winter. "There's not much work for women here," Martha admitted. "I take in washing when I can, but it barely keeps me fed. Sarah was working as a seamstress, but even that dried up." "I can sew," Louisa offered, "and I can read and write. I taught at a primary school back in Boston." Martha's expression turned doubtful. "The schoolhouse closed 2 years ago. Not enough children left to warrant keeping it open. As for sewing, well, folks here mend their own clothes until they're more patch than original fabric." That night, lying on a thin pallet on Martha's floor, Louisa listened to the wind howling outside and wondered if she'd made a terrible mistake. She couldn't afford passage back to Boston even if she wanted to return, which she didn't. There was nothing for her there except memories of her parents' deaths and the small apartment she'd shared with them. At least here, there had been the promise of family, of a new beginning. Now even that was gone. The next morning, Martha took her to the general store where a hand-written notice board advertised what little work existed in the area. Most were looking for ranch hands, all specifying men only. One notice caught her eye, though, written in a firm, masculine hand. "Housekeeper wanted. Room and board provided plus $20 monthly. Must be reliable and able to cook. Apply at the Iron Creek Ranch 5 miles north. Ask for Isaac Quincy." "That's old man Quincy's place," Martha said, reading over her shoulder. "Well, not old man anymore. Isaac's been running it since his father passed last spring. He's a good man from what I hear. Keeps to himself mostly. Lost his wife 2 years back." "Do you think he'd consider me?" Louisa asked, hope flickering in her chest. Only one way to find out. I can get Tom Bradley to drive you out there this afternoon. He owes me a favor. Tom Bradley turned out to be a grizzled man in his 60s who said little during the bumpy ride north in his wagon. Louisa used the time to prepare what she'd say, rehearsing in her mind how she'd present herself as capable and hardworking, despite having no real experience keeping house on a ranch. The Iron Creek Ranch appeared gradually on the horizon, and Louisa felt her breath catch. It was larger than she'd expected, with a substantial main house built of timber and stone, a big barn, several outbuildings, and extensive corrals where horses moved in the afternoon light. This wasn't some struggling homestead. This was a proper working ranch. "Quincy does well for himself," Tom commented, breaking his silence. "Has the best horse breeding operation in the territory. Supplies cavalry mounts and working stock to ranches from here to New Mexico. He's particular about his horses and particular about most everything else too. Fair man, though." He pulled the wagon up to the main house and helped Louisa down. "Want me to wait?" she considered, then shook her head. "No, thank you. I'm sure I can manage either way." She didn't mention that she had no money to pay him for a return trip anyway. Tom nodded and drove off, leaving her standing alone in the yard. The wind had picked up again, colder now as afternoon shadows lengthened. She approached the wide front porch and knocked firmly on the solid wooden door. Footsteps sounded inside, heavy boots on wooden floors. The door opened, and Louisa found herself looking up at one of the most striking men she'd ever seen. Isaac Quincy stood well over 6 feet tall, broad-shouldered and lean, with dark hair that fell just past his collar and eyes the color of summer sky. His face was tanned and weathered from outdoor work, with fine lines around his eyes and a strong jaw shadowed with stubble. He looked to be in his early 30s, and there was something in his expression, a guarded quality that suggested life had not always been kind to him. "Can I help you?" His voice was deep and measured, neither friendly nor unfriendly. "My name is Louisa Harper. I saw your notice in town about needing a housekeeper." His blue eyes studied her carefully, taking in her travel-worn dress and the way she shivered slightly in the cold. "You're new to Snowflake." "I arrived yesterday from Boston. I came to stay with my cousin, but she passed away recently. I need work, and I'm willing to work hard." "Have you kept house before?" Louisa chose her words carefully. "I managed my family's household in Boston after my mother died. I can cook plain but hearty food, clean, do laundry, and mend. I'm organized and I don't shy away from hard work." "This isn't Boston, Miss Harper. Ranch life is different. The work is constant and it's not easy. Winter's coming on and it gets cold out here. Bitter cold. The kind of cold that city folk aren't prepared for." "I cannot bear the cold," she admitted honestly, another shiver running through her. "But I need this position, Mr. Quincy. I have nowhere else to go and no way to get there even if I did. I promise you won't regret giving me a chance." Something in her direct honesty seemed to reach him. His expression softened slightly. "Come inside before you freeze standing on my porch." The interior of the house was spacious, but clearly lacked a woman's touch. The main room served as both sitting area and dining space, with a large stone fireplace, sturdy furniture that had seen better days, and surfaces that could use a good dusting. Through a doorway, she could see a kitchen that looked functional but cluttered. "I've been making do on my own since my last housekeeper left 3 months ago," Isaac said, following her gaze. "Mrs. Patterson was with us for years, but her daughter in California needed her. Place has gone downhill since. How many people would I be cooking for? Just me most of the time. I have 2 ranch hands, Miguel and his son Carlos, but they have their own place in the bunkhouse and usually handle their own meals. During busy seasons, we might have extra hands, but I'd give you notice." He walked to the fireplace and added another log, stirring up the flames. "The position includes room and board. There's a bedroom off the kitchen that was Mrs. Patterson's. It has its own stove. $20 a month paid on the first. Sundays are yours to do as you please, though I'd need breakfast before church if you attend. Work starts at 5 in the morning with breakfast. Dinner at noon, supper at 6. In between, there's cleaning, laundry, mending, and whatever else needs doing. I'm not here to stand over you telling you what to do. I expect you to see what needs doing and do it." "That sounds more than fair." Isaac turned to face her fully, his blue eyes searching hers. "I need to be straight with you, Miss Harper. This ranch is my life. I've built it from nothing after my father died and left me with more debt than assets. I've worked every day for the past decade to make it what it is now. I need someone reliable, someone who's going to stay and do the job right. I can't afford to train someone new every few months. I understand. I need stability just as much as you do. If you give me this chance, I'll prove myself." He was quiet for a long moment, clearly weighing the decision. Finally, he nodded. "All right, we'll try it for a month. If it works out, the position is yours for as long as you want it." Relief flooded through Louisa so powerfully she felt her knees weaken. "Thank you, Mr. Quincy. You won't regret this. We'll see. Do you have belongings in town?" "Just a trunk at Martha Yates' house. I'll send Carlos for it tomorrow. For now, let me show you your room and we'll see about getting some supper started." The bedroom off the kitchen was small but comfortable, with a single bed, a dresser, a chair, and a small pot-bellied stove already radiating warmth. A window looked out toward the barn and corrals. It was more than Louisa had dared hope for. Isaac showed her the kitchen, pointing out where supplies were kept, explaining his preferences and routines. He wasn't demanding, just thorough, and Louisa found herself relaxing slightly in his presence. There was something solid and trustworthy about him, despite his reserved manner. "I usually keep things simple," he said, gesturing at the pantry stocked with basics. "Bacon, beans, beef when we butcher, bread if there's time for it, coffee strong and hot. I'm not particular beyond that." Louisa surveyed what was available and made a quick plan. "I can make a decent stew with what's here, and there's time for biscuits if you have buttermilk. In the springhouse out back. Take what you need." She set to work while Isaac retreated to his office, a room off the main living area, where she could hear him shuffling papers and scratching pen across ledger pages. Despite her nerves, Louisa found comfort in the familiar routine of cooking. She told the truth about managing her family's household. After her mother's death 3 years ago, she'd taken over all the domestic duties while teaching school, caring for her ailing father until he'd passed 6 months ago. The kitchen warmed with the heat from the stove, and soon the rich aroma of beef stew filled the house. Louisa made biscuits from memory, her hands remembering the feel of the dough even as her mind worried about whether they'd be good enough. She set the table, found some butter in the springhouse, and called Isaac to supper at precisely 6 o'clock. He came in washing his hands at the kitchen pump, then sat at the head of the table. Louisa served him, and then hesitated, unsure whether she was expected to eat with him or separately. "Sit down, Miss Harper," he said, noticing her uncertainty. "I'm not so formal that my housekeeper can't eat at the same table." She sat, and they ate in silence for several minutes. Louisa watched him anxiously from the corner of her eye, trying to gauge his reaction to the food. "This is good," he said finally, sopping up gravy with a biscuit. "Better than I've had in months. Where'd you learn to make biscuits like this?" "My mother taught me." She was from Tennessee originally, and she said proper biscuits were essential to civilized living, no matter where you found yourself. She was right about that. He ate another one, and Louisa felt a small glow of pride and relief. After supper, Isaac retreated to his office again while Louisa cleaned the kitchen, learning where everything belonged, making mental notes of what needed restocking. By the time she finished, full darkness had fallen, and she was exhausted from the long day and the emotional upheaval of the past 24 hours. She retreated to her small room, fed more wood into her stove, and changed into her nightgown. The bed was comfortable, the room warm, and for the first time since leaving Boston, Louisa felt a tiny seed of hope taking root. She had a job, a place to stay, and a chance to build a new life. It wasn't what she'd planned, but it was something. The next weeks fell into a steady rhythm. Louisa rose before dawn to start breakfast, learning Isaac's preferences and adjusting her cooking accordingly. He liked his coffee strong enough to strip paint, his bacon crisp, his eggs over easy. He ate quickly and efficiently, already mentally planning his day's work before he finished his meal. After breakfast, he'd head out to the barns and corrals, working with his horses or riding out to check fence lines and water sources. Louisa would clean, do laundry, mend clothes, and prepare the midday dinner. In the afternoons, there was always more to do, preserving food, organizing supplies, deep cleaning rooms that had been neglected. She met Miguel and his son Carlos the second day. Miguel was a stocky man in his 50s with a weathered face and kind eyes. Carlos was 19, quiet and hardworking like his father. They were respectful to Louisa, grateful when she occasionally sent over fresh bread or pie, and they clearly had deep loyalty to Isaac. "Mr. Isaac, he is a good boss," Miguel told her one afternoon when he came to the kitchen for some salve for an injured horse. "Fair pay, treats us with respect. Not all ranchers are like this, especially with Mexican workers. We are lucky to be here." Louisa learned more about Isaac through observation than conversation. He was a man of few words, preferring action to talk. He worked from dawn until well after dark most days, checking on every aspect of the ranch operation personally. He was patient with his horses, firm but gentle, and they responded to him with obvious trust. He'd inherited the ranch from his father, but in poor condition. His father had been a dreamer but not a businessman, according to Martha, who'd filled Louisa in during one of her Sunday visits to town. Isaac had spent years paying off debts, building up the horse breeding program, and establishing a reputation for quality stock. His late wife had died in childbirth, along with the baby, 2 years earlier. He'd buried them on a hill overlooking the ranch and hadn't courted anyone since. November deepened into December, and the weather turned colder. Louisa had grown up with Boston winters, but she'd been right to worry about the cold out here. The wind seemed to cut right through walls, and on particularly bitter mornings, she'd wake to find frost on the inside of her window. One evening, about 5 weeks after she'd arrived, Isaac came in for supper, stamping snow off his boots. The first real snow had started that afternoon, and through the kitchen window, Louisa could see it coming down steadily now, transforming the ranch into a white landscape. "Storm's going to be bad," Isaac said, warming his hands by the kitchen stove. "I've brought all the horses into the near corrals. Miguel and Carlos are staying in the bunkhouse rather than riding out to their place. We could be snowed in for a few days." Louisa felt a flutter of anxiety. "Do we have enough supplies?" "Should be fine. You've been keeping the pantry well stocked. We won't starve, just might get tired of each other's company." Over supper, Isaac was more talkative than usual, perhaps anticipating the forced isolation of the coming storm. He asked about her life in Boston, and Louisa found herself sharing more than she'd intended about her parents, her work as a teacher, the decision to leave everything behind and head west. "You regret it?" he asked. "Coming out here." She considered the question carefully. "I regret losing my cousin before I could see her again. But coming west? No, I don't regret that. There was nothing left for me in Boston except memories. At least here I have a chance to build something new. It's not easy building a new life from scratch. You did it. I had the ranch as a foundation, even if it was a shaky one. You came here with nothing. I came here with determination. Sometimes that's enough." He studied her across the table, and for the first time, Louisa saw something in his eyes beyond casual employer interest. "You're stronger than you look, Miss Harper." "I've had to be, Mr. Quincy." The storm intensified overnight, and by morning, snow was piled high against the buildings. Isaac and his men spent the day breaking ice on water troughs, checking on animals, and keeping paths shoveled between buildings. Louisa kept the fires burning and the coffee hot, cooking hearty meals to fuel their cold work. On the third day of the storm, as evening fell and the wind howled around the house, Isaac came in covered in snow, shivering despite his heavy coat. Louisa took one look at him and pointed at the fireplace. "Get out of those wet clothes before you catch pneumonia. I'll heat water for coffee." He obeyed without argument, which told her how cold he really was. He changed in his bedroom and returned in dry clothes, settling into the chair closest to the fire. Louisa brought him coffee laced with a little whiskey from the bottle she'd found in the pantry. "Drink that. You're half frozen." "I'm fine." "You're stubborn is what you are. Drink." He did, and some color returned to his face. Outside, the wind rattled the windows and the temperature continued to drop. Even with both fireplaces burning, cold seemed to seep into the house. "It's going to be a bitter night," Isaac said, staring into the flames. "Coldest of the season so far." Louisa wrapped her shawl tighter around her shoulders, but she couldn't suppress a shiver. The truth was, even her small stove couldn't keep her room truly warm on nights like this. She'd taken to sleeping in every piece of clothing she owned and piling all her blankets on top of the bed. Isaac noticed the shiver. "Your room doesn't stay warm enough, does it?" "It's fine." "Miss Harper, you're a terrible liar. I've seen frost on your windows in the morning." "I manage." He was quiet for a moment, then said, "I cannot bear the cold. You told me that the first day we met. Here I am promising you room and board, and you're freezing in that little room." "I didn't mean to complain." "You're not complaining. I'm observing." He stood and walked to the window, looking out at the blowing snow. "The stove in that room has never been adequate for real winter. Mrs. Patterson was from Montana and seemed to have ice in her veins. She never minded, but you shouldn't have to suffer. What choice is there?" He turned back to face her, his expression serious but not unkind. "This house stays warmer than any of the outbuildings. The main bedroom upstairs, the one I use, it's above this room so it gets heat from both fireplaces. There's a second bedroom up there, smaller, but it would be warmer than where you are now." Louisa felt her face warm despite the cold. Moving upstairs, closer to his room, felt like crossing some invisible line of propriety. "I don't think that would be appropriate." "More appropriate than you freezing to death in my employ. What would people say about that?" "People might talk if I'm sleeping upstairs." "What people?" "Miguel and Carlos. They're not gossips. And anyone in town with sense knows that a housekeeper needs to actually survive the winter to do her job." He had a point, but Louisa still hesitated. Isaac sighed and ran a hand through his hair, a gesture she'd learned meant he was choosing his words carefully. "Look, I'm not suggesting anything improper. I'm simply saying there's a warmer room available that's going to waste while you freeze. The door has a lock if that makes you feel better. But I promise you, Miss Harper, you're safe in this house. I'm not that kind of man." Louisa believed him. In the 6 weeks she'd been here, Isaac had never been anything but respectful, keeping appropriate distance, never making her uncomfortable. Still, she'd spent her whole life following society's rules about propriety, and this felt like a significant breach. As if reading her thoughts, Isaac said quietly, "I know what people said after my wife died, that I should remarry quickly, that a ranch needs a woman's touch, that it wasn't proper for me to be alone, but I couldn't just replace her like a broken tool. I'm not looking for that kind of complication, Miss Harper. I just don't want my housekeeper freezing because I'm too stubborn to offer a warmer room." The sincerity in his voice decided her. "All right, thank you. I appreciate the consideration. Good. I'll help you move your things up after supper." The upstairs bedroom was indeed warmer, heated by the chimney from below and close enough to Isaac's room to benefit from his fireplace as well. It was simply furnished with a bed, dresser, and a chair by the window, but it felt luxurious compared to the cold little room downstairs. "Thank you," Louisa said again as Isaac set down the last of her belongings. "This is much better." "I'll keep you warm every night," he said, then seemed to realize how that sounded and quickly clarified. The house will keep you warmer. These upstairs rooms, they hold heat better." Was he actually flustered? Louisa found it endearing, this crack in his usually composed demeanor. "I understood your meaning, Mr. Quincy, and I'm grateful." He nodded and retreated to his own room, and Louisa set about arranging her few possessions. That night, for the first time since arriving at the ranch, she was genuinely warm enough to sleep comfortably. But she found herself lying awake anyway, aware of Isaac in the next room, separated by just a wall. She could hear the faint sounds of him moving around, preparing for bed, and it created an unexpected intimacy that was both unsettling and oddly comforting. The storm blew itself out by morning, leaving the world buried in white. The days that followed were busy ones as everyone worked to dig out and return to normal routines. But something had shifted between Louisa and Isaac. Some invisible barrier had lowered slightly. He began lingering over meals more often, asking her opinions on things beyond household matters. She found herself doing the same, curious about his work with the horses, about his plans for the ranch's future. Their conversations grew longer, more personal. One Sunday afternoon, when Louisa had returned from church services in town, she found Isaac in the barn working with a young horse. She changed out of her good dress and came out to watch, fascinated by his patience as he worked to gain the animal's trust. "You have a gift with them," she observed. "Horses are honest," he said, stroking the young mare's neck. "They don't lie or pretend. If you treat them right, they respond. If you're harsh or impatient, they remember. There's something pure about that." "How did you learn?" "My mother was the horse person in the family. She grew up on a ranch in Texas and could ride before she could walk, or so she claimed. She taught me young that horses weren't just tools for work, they were partners. After she died when I was 12, working with horses kept me connected to her memory. My father never really understood it, but he let me focus on that side of the ranch." It was the most personal thing he'd shared with her, and Louisa felt honored by the confidence. "She'd be proud of what you've built here." "I hope so. She'd definitely be appalled at how I've let the house go, though. She kept everything spotless." "The house is fine. It's better now that you're here. I didn't realize how much I'd let slide until you started fixing things. The curtains actually close properly now. The windows are clean enough to see through. I can find my socks without a search expedition." Louisa laughed. "That's a low bar for success, Mr. Quincy." "Isaac," he said suddenly. "You should call me Isaac. Mr. Quincy makes me sound like my father, and we've been living under the same roof for nearly 2 months now. Seems silly to be so formal." "All right, Isaac. Then you should call me Louisa." Louisa, he repeated, and she liked the way her name sounded in his deep voice. It suits you better than Miss Harper anyway. Christmas approached, and Louisa threw herself into preparations. She'd always loved the holiday, and despite being far from everything familiar, she was determined to make it special. She spent her evenings making decorations from pine boughs and berries, baked cookies and fruitcake, and even managed to find a small evergreen that Isaac helped her set up in the main room. "This is quite the production," Isaac observed, watching her string popcorn into garlands. Christmas should be celebrated properly. It's important to maintain traditions, especially when you're far from home. "You miss Boston." It wasn't quite a question, but she answered anyway. "I miss the familiarity of it, the streets I knew, the church I attended, the routines. But I don't miss the loneliness. After my parents died, I felt like a ghost haunting my old life. At least here, I'm building something new." "You've done more than that. You've brought life back to this place. I didn't realize how empty it had become until you filled it up again." The warmth in his voice made her look up from her work. Isaac was watching her with an expression she'd never seen before, something soft and vulnerable that made her heart flutter unexpectedly. "I'm glad I ended up here," she said softly. "Despite everything, this feels like home now." "Good. I'd hate to think you were suffering in exile." On Christmas morning, Louisa woke early to prepare a special breakfast of cinnamon rolls, bacon, and coffee. She'd set aside small gifts for Miguel and Carlos, and when Isaac came down, she shyly handed him a package wrapped in brown paper. "You didn't have to get me anything," he protested. "Just open it." Inside were 2 shirts she'd made from fabric she'd purchased from her own wages, cut to fit his tall frame with careful stitching and reinforced seams. Isaac held them up, clearly moved. "These are the finest shirts I've ever owned. Thank you, Louisa. You needed some that actually fit properly and didn't have patches on the patches." He disappeared upstairs and returned a few minutes later with his own package, looking almost nervous as he handed it to her. Inside was a beautiful wool shawl in deep burgundy, much finer than anything she'd brought from Boston. "Isaac, this is too much. It's practical. You need something warm, and the color seemed like it would suit you." She wrapped it around her shoulders, and it was indeed beautifully warm, the wool soft and thick. "It's perfect. Thank you." They had a quiet dinner, just the 2 of them, since Miguel and Carlos had gone to spend the day with friends in a nearby Mexican settlement. Louisa had roasted a chicken and made all the traditional accompaniments she remembered from Christmases past. Over pie and coffee, Isaac told stories from his childhood, and Louisa shared memories of her parents. As evening fell and they sat by the fire, Louisa realized she was happier than she'd been in years. This simple Christmas in a ranch house in Arizona Territory was exactly where she was supposed to be. "Thank you for this day," Isaac said quietly. "It's been a long time since Christmas felt like something worth celebrating. You should celebrate it every year. Life is hard enough without skipping the moments of joy." "Is that your philosophy?" "It's getting there. I'm still learning how to find joy after loss." "We both are." He looked at her across the firelight. "But I think we're both making progress." Winter settled in deeply after Christmas. January brought bitter cold and several more snowstorms. The ranch work continued regardless of whether horses needed tending, equipment needed maintaining, supplies needed managing. Isaac and his men worked hard every day, and Louisa kept the house running smoothly. But the evenings grew longer too. With darkness falling early and the cold keeping them inside more, Louisa and Isaac spent more time together. He taught her to play chess, and they'd spend evenings battling over the board. She introduced him to some of the poetry she loved, reading aloud while he worked on tack repairs by the fire. They were becoming friends, Louisa realized. Good friends. She looked forward to his company, found herself listening for his footsteps, felt a flutter of happiness when he smiled at something she'd said. It was more than just appreciating a good employer. Something deeper was growing between them. One evening in late January, a problem with a water line meant Isaac had to work late in freezing conditions. He came in after dark, soaked and shivering, his hands nearly blue with cold. Louisa immediately sprang into action, heating water, laying out dry clothes, building up both fires. "You need to get out of those wet things immediately," she insisted. "I'm fine." "You're half frozen and arguing with me about it. That's not fine, that's stubborn foolishness. Now do as I say before you lose fingers to frostbite." He was too cold to argue, and once he'd changed and returned to the kitchen, Louisa made him sit by the stove while she examined his hands. They were red and raw but not frostbitten. Thank goodness. She filled a basin with lukewarm water to help them warm gradually. "This is going to hurt," she warned. It did, judging by the way he winced as sensation returned to his fingers. Without thinking, Louisa took his hands in hers, rubbing gently to help circulation. It was an intimate gesture, kneeling before him, holding his hands, but it felt natural in the moment. "Better?" she asked after a few minutes. "Much." His voice was rough. When she looked up, she found him watching her with an intensity that made her breath catch. "Louisa." "Yes, I need to tell you something. I've been trying trying to maintain proper boundaries, but I'm not sure I can anymore." Her heart began to race. "What is it?" "You've become important to me. More important than I intended when I hired you. I look forward to seeing you every morning. I find myself hurrying through work so I can get back to the house, back to you. When you read poetry in the evenings, I'm not really hearing the words, I'm just listening to your voice. And when you smile at something I've said, it's the best part of my day." Louisa's hands tightened on his. "Isaac, I know this complicates things. You work for me and that makes this inappropriate. But I can't keep pretending what I feel is just employer appreciation. I care for you, Louisa, deeply." Joy and fear warred in her chest. "I care for you too, I have for weeks now. But I was afraid to admit it, afraid of what it might mean." "What do you want it to mean?" It was such a direct question, so typical of Isaac's straightforward nature. Louisa took a breath and answered with equal honesty. "I want it to mean I stay here not just as your housekeeper, but as part of your life. I want more evenings by the fire, more conversations, more of whatever this is growing between us. I want to see where it leads, even though it means more talk in town. People will have opinions about the housekeeper and the rancher. Let them talk. I left Boston to build a new life. I didn't realize that might include building it with someone, but I'm not going to run from it just because it's unexpected." Isaac lifted one of his hands to cup her cheek, and despite the cold, Louisa leaned into the touch. "I can't promise this will be easy. Ranch life is hard, and I'm probably not the easiest man to love. But I promise I'll try to be worthy of whatever you're willing to give." "I think you already are." He helped her to her feet, and then, slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, he leaned down and kissed her. It was gentle and sweet, full of tentative hope and contained passion. Louisa's heart soared as she kissed him back, her hands resting on his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart beneath her palms. When they finally pulled apart, both were smiling. "Well," Isaac said, "that's certainly changed things. For the better, I hope. Definitely for the better." They sat together by the fire for hours that night, talking about their feelings, their hopes, their concerns. Isaac worried about rushing her, about taking advantage of her dependent position. Louisa assured him that she was making her own choice freely, that she wanted this as much as he did. "I've learned something these past months," she told him. Home isn't a place, it's a feeling, and with you I feel home. Then stay, he said, not just as my housekeeper. Stay as my partner, my companion. Stay and build this life with me. I will, for as long as you'll have me. That might be a very long time. I'm counting on it. The winter passed with new warmth despite the cold. Isaac and Louisa's relationship deepened day by day. They were careful in front of Miguel and Carlos at first, but the two men were perceptive and clearly approved of the development. "About time, boss," Miguel said one morning with a knowing smile. "Miss Louisa is good for you. The whole ranch feels lighter with her here." In early March, during one of Louisa's Sunday trips to town, Martha commented on how happy she looked. "Ranch life must agree with you," Martha said with a meaningful look. "It does, very much." "And how is Mr. Quincy?" Louisa felt her cheeks warm. "He's well." "Very well," Martha laughed. "I'm glad. You both deserve some happiness. Lord knows you've both had enough sorrow." News spread quickly in a small town, as Louisa had known it would. But the reaction was mostly positive. People were more curious than judgmental, and many seemed genuinely pleased that the reserved rancher had found companionship. In April, when the snow finally melted and spring began greening the land, Isaac took Louisa for a ride up to the hill where his wife and child were buried. She'd never been there before, and she wasn't sure why he was taking her now until they stood together looking at the simple markers. "I loved her," Isaac said quietly. "I need you to know that. She was a good woman and losing her nearly broke me. I know. But she's gone, and I've spent 2 years trying to honor her memory by essentially stopping my own life. I don't think she'd want that. I think she'd want me to live, to be happy, to find love again if I could." "I think so too." He turned to face Louisa, taking both her hands. "I'm ready to move forward now with you if you'll have me." "Are you asking what I think you're asking? Marry me, Louisa. Make this partnership permanent. Help me build something beautiful on this land. Have a family with me. Grow old with me." Tears sprang to her eyes. "Yes. Yes to all of it." He kissed her there on the hillside with the spring wind blowing around them and new grass growing beneath their feet. It felt like a beginning and a blessing all at once. They were married in June in the small church in Snowflake, with Martha standing up for Louisa and Miguel for Isaac. Carlos played guitar during the simple ceremony, and half the town showed up despite the short notice. Louisa wore a new dress in pale blue, made with Martha's help, and Isaac wore one of the shirts she'd given him at Christmas. When the Reverend pronounced them married, and Isaac kissed his bride, the small church erupted in applause. It felt like the whole community was celebrating with them, welcoming this new chapter. The reception was held at the ranch, with tables set up outside and food contributed by neighbors. It wasn't fancy, but it was full of genuine warmth and goodwill. As the sun set and lanterns were lit, Isaac pulled Louisa into a dance, moving slowly to Carlos's guitar music. "Happy?" he asked. "Happier than I knew was possible. When I arrived here 8 months ago, I thought my life was ending. Instead, it was just beginning." "Our life," he corrected. "Everything I have is yours now. The ranch, the house, my future, all of it. And everything I am is yours. My heart, my loyalty, my love. That's all I need." The first year of marriage was everything Louisa had hoped and more. She threw herself into making the ranch house a true home, adding touches of beauty and comfort to the practical space. She planted a garden, cultivated flowers, hung new curtains, and filled the rooms with the warmth she'd always imagined a home should have. But more than that, she discovered the deep satisfaction of partnership. She and Isaac made decisions together, discussed plans, supported each other through difficulties. When prices for horses dropped that fall, they weathered the financial stress as a team. When Louisa fell ill with influenza in winter, Isaac nursed her with tender devotion. They laughed together, worked together, dreamed together. Isaac taught her to ride, and they'd explore the ranch lands on horseback. Louisa taught him to appreciate books and music. They built a life rich in small pleasures and deep contentment. In the spring of 1884, Louisa discovered she was pregnant. The joy was immediate and intense, but it was shadowed by Isaac's obvious fear. He tried to hide it, but Louisa knew him too well now. "Talk to me," she said one evening. "Tell me what you're feeling." "I'm scared," he admitted. "After what happened with Elaine, how can I not be? I couldn't bear losing you, Louisa. You've become everything to me." "I'm healthy and strong. Dr. Morrison says everything looks good. We have to trust that this will be different." "I want to trust it. I want to be excited without the fear." "Then be both. Be excited and scared. That's what I am, but we'll face it together just like we face everything." He pulled her close, resting his hand on her still flat belly. "Together, I promise I won't let the fear steal the joy." As her pregnancy progressed, Isaac was attentive and protective without being smothering. He insisted she rest more, hired a woman from town to help with the heavier housework, and worried constantly despite his promises not to. "I'm having a baby, not dying," Louisa reminded him regularly. "I know. I just want you safe." "Then trust Dr. Morrison and trust me. Women have been doing this since the beginning of time." In November, as winter approached once again, Louisa's labor began. Dr. Morrison arrived quickly, and Martha came to help. Isaac paced anxiously outside the bedroom door until Martha finally let him in to sit with Louisa between contractions. "I'm terrified," he admitted, holding her hand. "Don't be. I'm strong, and this baby is strong. We're going to be fine." She spoke with more confidence than she felt, but as the hours passed, Louisa drew strength from Isaac's presence. When their son finally arrived in the early morning hours, crying lustily and healthy, Isaac wept with relief. "He's perfect," Dr. Morrison announced. "Strong lungs on this one." "And Louisa?" Isaac asked urgently, tired but healthy. "She did beautifully." Isaac kissed his wife's forehead, then accepted the bundle Martha handed him. His son looked up at him with unfocused dark blue eyes, and Isaac fell completely in love. "Hello, little one. Welcome to the world." "What should we name him?" Louisa asked, exhausted but glowing. "I was thinking Thomas, after your father, Thomas Henry Quincy." "That's perfect. Hello, Thomas. We've been waiting for you." Parenthood transformed their lives in ways both expected and surprising. Thomas was a good baby, healthy and strong, with his father's eyes and his mother's dark hair. Isaac was devoted from the start, helping with nighttime feedings, walking the floors when Thomas fussed, marveling at every new development. "I never knew I could love anyone as much as I love you," he told Louisa one night as they watched their son sleep. "But somehow there's even more love now. How does that work? The heart just expands to make room. That's what my mother used to say." She was a wise woman. The ranch continued to prosper. Isaac's reputation for quality horses grew, and buyers came from across the territory. He expanded operations, hired more help, and invested in improving the facilities. Louisa managed the household and the books, proving herself to be as talented with numbers as she was with domestic arts. Miguel and Carlos had become like family, and when Carlos married a young woman from the Mexican settlement and brought her to live in an expanded bunkhouse, Louisa welcomed Rosa warmly. The two women became good friends despite the language barrier, teaching each other their respective languages and helping with childcare as both their families grew. 2 years after Thomas's birth, Louisa had a daughter they named Sarah, after her cousin. Sarah was a tiny, delicate baby with blonde hair and green eyes that seemed to see everything. If Thomas was like his father, steady and strong, Sarah was like her mother, quick and clever, charming everyone she met. "Our family is complete," Isaac said, holding Sarah while Thomas leaned against his leg. "Is it?" Louisa asked with a smile. "Well, maybe not completely complete. I wouldn't mind a few more if you're willing. Let me recover from this one first, then we'll see." Life fell into a comfortable rhythm. The seasons turned, bringing their expected challenges and rewards. Calves were born, horses were trained and sold, crops were planted and harvested. Thomas and Sarah grew, filling the house with laughter and noise. In 1887, when Thomas was 3 and Sarah was 1, another son joined the family. They named him James, and he was the perfect blend of his siblings, Thomas's steadiness and Sarah's charm. Isaac joked that he was outnumbered now by children, but the joy in his eyes belied any complaints. "How's your heart holding up?" Louisa teased him one evening as he sat with all 3 children climbing on him like he was a mountain to be conquered, expanding daily. "I may need to see the doctor about it soon. There's only so much a man can take. Somehow I think you'll survive." The years passed in a blur of family dinners and holiday celebrations, of teaching children to ride and helping with homework, of laughter and occasional tears, of the countless small moments that make up a life. In 1892, standing on the porch watching their 3 children play in the yard while Isaac worked with a horse in the near corral, Louisa reflected on the journey that had brought her here. 10 years ago, she'd been alone and frightened, stepping off a stagecoach into an uncertain future. Now she stood in the middle of a rich, full life she'd never dared imagine. Isaac finished with the horse and walked over, pulling her into his arms from behind. "What are you thinking about? How far we've come. How much has changed since that first winter. You still worried about the cold?" She laughed. "You kept your promise. You've kept me warm every night for 10 years now, and I'll keep you warm for the next 50, God willing. I'm counting on it." Thomas called from the yard, "Papa, watch me." And Isaac went to see whatever feat his son was attempting. Sarah ran over to show Louisa a flower she'd picked, and James toddled after his sister, determined not to be left out. This was everything Louisa had never known. She wanted this noisy, chaotic, beautiful life. The ranch that had once seemed so foreign now felt like the only home she'd ever truly had. The man who'd once been a stranger was now the center of her world. The children she'd worried she might never have filled her days with purpose and joy. As the sun set over the Arizona landscape, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, the family gathered on the porch. Isaac held James while Thomas and Sarah leaned against their parents, tired from their day of play. Inside, supper was waiting, and after that would come baths and stories and tucking everyone into bed. "I love our life," Louisa said softly. "So do I," Isaac replied. "Every single day of it." Winter came again, as it always did, but Louisa no longer feared the cold. The house was warm, her family was healthy, and her heart was full. She'd traveled across the country chasing the hope of family, and she'd found so much more love, partnership, home, and a future bright with promise. On a snowy December evening, much like the one when Isaac had first promised to keep her warm, they sat together by the fire after the children were asleep. Isaac pulled Louisa close, and she rested her head on his shoulder, perfectly content. "Thank you," she said quietly. "For what?" "For giving me a chance that first day. For seeing past the scared woman on your porch to the person I could become. For loving me. Thank you for staying, for taking a chance on a rough rancher who didn't know how to express what he felt, for bringing life and love back to this place. For building this beautiful life with me. I wouldn't want to be anywhere else or with anyone else. Neither would I. Whatever challenges come, we'll face them together." "Together," Louisa agreed. "Always." Outside, snow fell softly on the ranch, covering everything in white. But inside, surrounded by the warmth of home and family and enduring love, Louisa had never felt more perfectly, completely warm. The cold winter she'd once feared had become a season she cherished, another turn in the cycle of their shared life. The promise Isaac had made 10 years ago had proven true in ways neither of them could have predicted. He'd kept her warm not just physically, but emotionally and spiritually, filling her life with the kind of deep, abiding warmth that comes only from true partnership and genuine love. And as they sat together in the firelight, listening to the wind outside and the quiet sounds of their sleeping children upstairs, both knew that this was exactly where they were meant to be together. Warm, home. The years continued to unfold with their mixture of joy and challenge. Thomas grew into a serious boy who followed his father everywhere, determined to learn everything about running the ranch. At 8 years old, he was already skilled with horses and showed every sign of inheriting Isaac's natural gift with animals. Sarah, at 6, was bright and curious, constantly asking questions and getting into creative mischief that kept Louisa on her toes. James, at 5, was the peacemaker, sensitive and kind, often found caring for injured animals or comforting his siblings when they argued. In the spring of 1893, Louisa discovered she was pregnant again. This pregnancy was harder than the others, leaving her exhausted and sick for months. Isaac worried constantly, and even the children noticed, becoming unusually quiet and helpful around the house. "Maybe this is the universe telling us 4 children is enough," Isaac said one evening as he helped Louisa to bed early yet again. "Or maybe this one just wants to make sure we remember them," Louisa replied, attempting humor despite feeling miserable. Dr. Morrison visited regularly, and while he assured them everything was progressing normally, just more difficult for Louisa, Isaac remained anxious. He hired additional help for the house and took on more of the child care himself in the evenings. "You're supposed to be running a ranch, not playing nursemaid," Louisa protested weakly. "The ranch can wait. You and this baby can't. Besides, I've got good men working for me. Miguel and Carlos can handle things." In October, Louisa went into labor early, and this time it was long and difficult. Isaac refused to leave her side, holding her hand through every contraction, whispering encouragement and love. When their daughter finally arrived, small but healthy, crying with impressive volume, the relief in the room was palpable. "Another girl," Martha announced, wrapping the baby carefully. "Tiny thing, but she's got spirit. Just like her mother," Isaac said, kissing Louisa's forehead. "You did it. You're both here and healthy." They named her Margaret Rose after both their mothers, calling her Maggie from the start. Despite her difficult arrival, she thrived, growing quickly and proving to have her father's stubborn determination and her mother's quick mind. With 4 children now, the house was constantly full of noise and activity. Louisa sometimes felt overwhelmed by the demands of motherhood and managing the household, but Isaac was a true partner, never relegating child care or domestic duties as solely her responsibility. "We made these children together," he'd say when helping with baths or homework. "We'll raise them together." It was this partnership that sustained them through the challenges that came. In 1894, a drought hit the territory hard. Water sources dried up, grazing land turned brown, and Isaac faced difficult decisions about which animals to keep and which to sell at a loss. The family tightened their belts, but they had enough put away to weather the crisis. "We'll make it through," Louisa assured Isaac during the worst of it. "We always do. I'm glad I don't have to face these things alone anymore. Having you beside me makes everything bearable." The drought broke in the spring of 1895, and with it came renewed prosperity. Isaac's careful management during the difficult time earned him respect throughout the territory. His reputation grew, and with it came opportunities. He was asked to serve on the Territorial Livestock Board, to advise other ranchers, to help establish standards for horse breeding programs. "You're becoming influential," Louisa observed with pride. "We're becoming influential," he corrected. "People know I consult my wife on all important decisions. You're as much a part of this ranch's success as I am." It was true that Louisa had become integral to the operation. She managed the books, handled correspondence, hosted buyers who came to look at horses, and provided the gracious hospitality that made the Iron Creek Ranch known for more than just quality stock. In 1896, Thomas turned 12 and began taking on real responsibilities around the ranch. He worked alongside Miguel and Carlos, learning the business from the ground up. Isaac was careful not to push too hard, wanting his son to choose this life rather than feel obligated to it. "If you want something different," Isaac told Thomas one evening, "that's fine. The ranch will continue whether you're part of it or not. I want you to be happy, not trapped." "I love the ranch, Papa. I can't imagine doing anything else." Sarah, meanwhile, showed no interest in horses or ranch work. She wanted to read and study, begging Louisa to teach her everything. At 10 years old, she read at a much higher level and talked constantly about seeing the world beyond Snowflake. "I think Sarah's going to break my heart someday by leaving," Louisa confided to Isaac. "Or she'll make us proud by doing something amazing. Either way, we'll support her." James and Maggie were still young enough that their futures remained open, though James showed signs of artistic talent, always drawing the horses and landscapes, while Maggie seemed determined to prove she could do anything her older brothers could do. As the century drew to a close, Isaac and Louisa found themselves entering middle age with grace. They were both in their early 40s now, their faces showing the marks of years lived, fully laugh lines around eyes, silver threading through hair, the comfortable ease of two people who'd weathered storms together and emerged stronger. One evening in December of 1899, as the new century approached, they stood together on the porch watching the sunset. Inside, the children were occupied with various activities, the house warm and bright with lamplight. "Can you believe it's been almost 18 years since we met?" Louisa asked. "Best decision I ever made hiring you. Best decision I ever made accepting the position. Do you ever miss Boston? Miss the life you left behind? Not even for a moment. Everything I need is right here." Isaac pulled her close and they stood in comfortable silence, watching the sky turn from pink to purple to dark blue. Stars began appearing, bright and clear in the cold desert air. "What do you think the new century will bring?" Louisa wondered. "Change, probably. Progress. Maybe challenges we can't imagine. But whatever comes, we'll face it together. Always together." The new century did indeed bring change. The Arizona Territory continued its slow journey toward statehood. Railroads expanded, bringing more people and commerce. Snowflake grew from a struggling outpost to a proper town with shops, schools, and churches. Sarah's dreams of education became reality when she earned a scholarship to attend a teacher's college in Flagstaff in 1902. Letting their 14-year-old daughter go was difficult, but Isaac and Louisa both recognized her need to spread her wings. "She'll come back," Isaac said, watching Sarah's excited face as she packed. "Maybe. Or maybe she'll find her place somewhere else. We have to be prepared for that." "I'm not sure I'll ever be prepared for my children leaving." "Then it's good we still have 3 at home." Thomas, now 16, was increasingly capable of managing ranch operations. Isaac began teaching him the business side, negotiating contracts, managing finances, planning for the future. Miguel, getting older now, began talking about retirement, suggesting Carlos take over as foreman when the time came. "Everything's changing," Isaac observed one evening. "Everything always changes. That's life. But the important things stay constant: family, love, home." In 1905, Thomas announced he wanted to marry Anna Wilson, the daughter of a neighboring rancher. At 19, he was young but mature beyond his years, and Anna was a sweet, capable girl who shared his love of ranch life. "You're sure?" Isaac asked his son. "Marriage is a lifetime commitment." "I'm sure, Papa. Just like you were sure about Mama." The wedding was held at the ranch in June, with half the territory in attendance. Watching Thomas and Anna exchange vows, Louisa felt the bittersweet mixture of joy and nostalgia that comes with seeing your children reach major milestones. "Our baby's all grown up," she whispered to Isaac, first of several. "James is already 15, and I've seen him making eyes at the blacksmith's daughter. Don't rush them. Let me enjoy having them home a little longer." Thomas and Anna built a small house on ranch property, and Anna proved to be everything Louisa had hoped for in a daughter-in-law: hardworking, kind, and genuinely in love with Thomas. When they announced they were expecting a baby in early 1906, the joy was universal. "I'm going to be a grandfather," Isaac said, sounding amazed. "When did I get old enough to be a grandfather?" "When you weren't paying attention," Louisa teased. "But you'll be wonderful at it, just like you're wonderful at everything else." Sarah came home for the summer that year, full of stories about her studies and plans to teach after graduation. She'd grown into a confident young woman with strong opinions and big dreams. "I might not come back to Snowflake permanently," she admitted to her parents. "There are opportunities in bigger cities, Phoenix or even California." "We'll miss you terribly," Louisa said, "but we want you to follow your dreams." "Just visit often," Isaac added, "and remember, this will always be home." Thomas and Anna's son was born in September 1906, and they named him Isaac after his grandfather. Holding his namesake, Isaac's eyes filled with tears. "This is something I never imagined," he said. "Seeing my son hold his son, it makes everything worth it, all the hard work, all the struggles." "We're building a legacy," Louisa said, watching Thomas gaze at his baby with the same wonder Isaac had shown with their children. "Not just a ranch, but a family that will go on for generations." As 1907 dawned, the Iron Creek Ranch was thriving in every sense. The business was successful, the family was growing, and Isaac and Louisa stood at the center of it all, the foundation upon which everything else was built. On a cold January evening, sitting by the fire as they had countless times over the years, Isaac pulled Louisa close and said, "Remember that first winter, when you told me you couldn't bear the cold? I remember everything about that winter. It changed my entire life." "Mine too. I was just existing before you came, going through the motions. You brought warmth and life and love back to this place, back to me. We saved each other, I think. I needed a home and you needed someone to share yours with. I've kept you warm every night, just like I promised. You have. In every way that matters." They sat in comfortable silence, the fire crackling, the house quiet with children and grandchild sleeping upstairs. Outside, snow fell softly, but inside, surrounded by the life they'd built together, Louisa felt only warmth, the warmth of love, of family, of a promise kept not just once but every single day for 25 years. The years continued their steady march. James married his sweetheart, Emily, in 1908, and they settled in Flagstaff, where James pursued his artistic talents, eventually becoming known for his paintings of Western landscapes. He visited often, bringing his wife and eventually their children to stay at the ranch during summers. Maggie, growing into a spirited young woman, declared she wanted to be a doctor, shocking everyone but particularly her mother, who immediately began researching women's medical colleges. "If that's what she wants, we'll find a way to make it happen," Louisa said firmly. "She gets that determination from you," Isaac observed. "She gets it from both of us. We've never let obstacles stop us. Why should she?" Sarah, true to her word, took a teaching position in Phoenix after graduating, though she came home regularly. In 1909, she arrived for Christmas with a young lawyer named Robert Stevens, nervously introducing him as her fiancé. "He's not a rancher," Sarah said, as if expecting disappointment. "He makes you happy," Isaac observed. "That's what matters." "Papa, you're supposed to interrogate him about his intentions and whether he can support me. Are your intentions honorable?" Isaac asked Robert with mock sternness. "Yes, sir. I love your daughter very much. And you can support her. I have a growing practice and good prospects." "Then you have my blessing. But Sarah doesn't need supporting in the financial sense. She's perfectly capable of supporting herself. What she needs is a partner who respects her mind and her independence. Can you be that?" "I can and I will. Good enough for me." The wedding was in Phoenix, but a celebration was held at the ranch afterward, bringing the whole scattered family together. Looking around at her children and their spouses, at her grandchildren playing in the yard, at the home she and Isaac had built and filled with love, Louisa felt overwhelmed with gratitude. "Having thoughts?" Isaac asked, coming to stand beside her. "Just thinking how lucky I am, how lucky we are." "No luck involved. We made this, you and I. Every hard decision, every moment of patience, every act of love. We built this family deliberately. You're right, and it's beautiful." In 1912, Arizona finally achieved statehood, and snowflakes celebrated with a massive festival. The Quincy family attended together, 3 generations strong. Isaac, now 61, watched the celebration with satisfaction. "We've seen this territory grow from rough frontier to proper state," he said to Louisa. "Just like we've grown from uncertain beginnings to something solid and lasting." "Do you ever regret any of it? The hard times, the struggles?" "Not for a second. The hard times made the good times sweeter, and I had you beside me through all of it. That made everything bearable and everything wonderful." Maggie left for medical school in San Francisco in 1913, and though Louisa missed her terribly, she was immensely proud. Letters came regularly, full of Maggie's excitement about her studies and her determination to return to Arizona to practice. "She'll come back," Isaac assured Louisa when she worried. "She's got too much of this place in her blood to stay away permanently." The ranch continued to prosper under the combined management of Isaac and Thomas. Young Isaac, now 7, was already showing signs of the same horse sense his grandfather and father possessed. Anna had given birth to a daughter, Mary, in 1910, and announced she was expecting again in 1914. "This family just keeps growing," Isaac observed with satisfaction. "That's what families do. We're building something that will last long after we're gone. Speaking of which, I've been meaning to discuss something with you." Louisa looked at him with concern. "What is it?" "Nothing bad, I promise. I've been thinking about the future of the ranch. Thomas is more than capable of running it, and I'm getting older. I thought maybe it's time we stepped back a bit, let the next generation take the lead." "You're 63, Isaac. You're not ancient." "No, but I'm not young either. And I've been thinking about all the things we've talked about doing but haven't because there's always ranch work. Maybe it's time we did some of those things." "Like what?" "Like traveling. Visiting the children and grandchildren more often without rushing back for ranch duties. Like spending evenings reading together or taking long rides just for the pleasure of it, not because we're checking fence lines. Like enjoying what we've built instead of constantly building. Louisa smiled. Are you saying you want to retire, Isaac Quincy? Semi-retire, maybe. Thomas can handle day-to-day operations. I'll still be here to advise, to help when needed. But I'd like more time with you, Louisa. We've earned it. She took his hand. Then let's do it. Let's enjoy this stage of our lives. The transition happened gradually over the next year. Thomas took over more responsibilities, proving himself more than capable. Isaac remained involved but stepped back from the daily grind, finding he enjoyed the slower pace. He and Louisa did travel, visiting their scattered children and grandchildren. They took a trip to San Francisco to see Maggie, marveling at the city and their daughter's accomplishments. They spent weeks in Flagstaff with James and his family. They visited Sarah and Robert in Phoenix, attending the theater and enjoying city life briefly before returning gratefully to the ranch. I'm glad we traveled, Louisa said after one such trip, but I'm always glad to come home. This will always be home, always be where we belong. In 1917, the nation entered the Great War, and though the fighting was far away, it touched the ranch. Young men from the territory enlisted, including Carlos's oldest son. The family worried and prayed, relieved when the war ended and their boy came home safely. Life continued its rhythms. Grandchildren grew, new ones arrived. Thomas and Anna had 5 children eventually. James and Emily had 3. Sarah and Robert had 2. Maggie, bucking convention, established her medical practice in Tucson before marrying another doctor and eventually having 1 son. By 1920, Isaac and Louisa had 15 grandchildren, with more on the way. The ranch remained prosperous, now spanning several generations of Quincy's working the land and raising horses. On their 30th wedding anniversary in June 1920, the entire family gathered at the ranch for a massive celebration. 3 generations of Quincy's filled the house and yard. Isaac, now 69, looked around at the gathering with deep satisfaction. This is more than I ever dreamed, he told the assembled family. More than I ever hoped for. Your grandmother and I started with nothing but hope and determination. Look what we built together. Tell us the story, one of the younger grandchildren called out. Tell us how you met. Louisa smiled at Isaac, and he nodded, launching into the familiar tale of a cold November day in 1882, when a woman from Boston arrived on his doorstep, shivering and desperate. I cannot bear the cold, she told me, Isaac said, his eyes finding Louisa across the room. And I promised her right then that I'd keep her warm every night. And he has, Louisa added. For 38 years now he's kept that promise. The grandchildren demanded more stories, and the afternoon passed in reminiscence and laughter. As evening fell and families began departing to their various homes, Isaac and Louisa stood on the porch waving goodbye, just as they had countless times over the decades. Tired? Isaac asked as the last wagon pulled away. Wonderfully tired. Happy tired. Come sit with me for a while before bed. They settled into the rocking chairs that had been on the porch for years, watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. The June evening was warm, and somewhere an owl hooted in the distance. 30 years married, Louisa mused. 38 years since we met. It doesn't seem possible. Time moves quickly when you're happy. We've had a good life, haven't we? The best life. We've loved well, worked hard, raised good children, and built something lasting. What more could anyone ask for? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. They sat in comfortable silence, hands linked between the chairs as they'd sat countless evenings over the decades. The ranch was quiet, the work done for the day, the next generation prepared to carry things forward. I love you, Isaac said quietly. just as much today as I did that first time I admitted it to myself all those years ago. More even. I love you too. You're still my best decision, Isaac Quincy. And you're still my greatest blessing, Louisa Quincy. The stars brightened overhead, the same stars that had watched over them through decades of joy and sorrow, triumph and challenge, birth and death, growth and change. The ranch slept around them, solid and permanent, a testament to promises kept and love honored. Inside the warm house, the fire still burned low in the hearth. Tomorrow would bring new work, new joys, new moments to treasure. But tonight, on their porch under the Arizona stars, Isaac and Louisa sat together, warm in each other's presence, surrounded by the life they'd built from hope and determination and love. The cold winter that had once seemed so daunting was now just another season in the cycle of their years. Welcomed for the excuse, it gave them to sit close by the fire, to share warmth, to remember that first desperate promise that had grown into a lifetime of kept commitments. "I'll keep you warm every night," Isaac had promised that long ago winter. And he had, for 38 years and counting, warming not just her body but her heart, her spirit, her entire life. It was a promise renewed every day, in every gesture of love and partnership, in every moment of shared joy and mutual support. As the years continued to unfold ahead of them, that promise would remain constant, the foundation of everything they'd built, the heart of everything they were, the guarantee of all they would continue to be together. Always warm, always home, always loved. And that, Louisa thought as Isaac squeezed her hand gently and she squeezed back, was the truest definition of a life well lived. Not perfect, never perfect, but real and rich and full of the warmth that comes from genuine love freely given and gratefully received. The stars wheeled overhead, marking time's passage, but on the porch of the Iron Creek Ranch, Isaac and Louisa Quincy sat together, proof that some promises transcend time, some loves endure beyond measure, and some stories that begin with cold and fear can transform into lifetimes of warmth and joy. Their story, begun on a desperate November day 38 years earlier, continued into the gentle June night, two hearts still beating as one, still warming each other, still building their beautiful life together, one day, one moment, one kept promise at a time.